Russia hardliners demand all-out war. Putin set to undergo surgery for cancer. US-UK high-level talks over China threat to Taiwan.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. It's May 3rd, Tuesday, and here are your top stories. Based on analysis of information from Russian security institutions, while exchanging recriminations for a growing list of failures in the war on Ukraine, the Army and even the Secret Services have been heard to blame not only the Fifth Service of the FSB for misinforming the Russian president, but also the president himself for making a bad call on changing the military strategy. The military now demands an all-out war, including mobilization and the use of nuclear weapons against targets in Ukraine.
The author argues that this is the very first time Siloviki, the Russian security institutions, are putting distance between themselves and the Russian president, which opens up all sorts of possibilities. Russia's military believes that limiting the war's initial goal is a serious error. It made Russian forces operate under peacetime constraints, like a bar on airstrike against some key areas of Ukraine's infrastructure. The author said, in short, the military now demands all-out war, and further Ukrainian victories will almost certainly prompt the use of nuclear weapons against targets in Ukraine.
A mysterious group called General SVR claimed Putin is set to undergo an operation for cancer and will hand over power for his hardliners by chief, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev. A video released by General SVR claimed Putin told Patrushev that in the event of post-surgery complications, he would be put in charge of temporarily running Russia. The president promised that in the event of a sharp deterioration in his health, the actual control of the country would pass temporarily to Patrushev.
The General SVR said in the video, Putin's attending physicians insist on him needing to undergo a surgical operation in the near future. And although Putin did not give his consent in principle, and the date of the operation was not agreed upon, he hurried to explain himself and got Patrushev response and promises. The General SVR said, after an almost 2-hour conversation, Patrushev got excited, and judging by the reaction of both, the so-called heart-to-heart conversation was positive.
Media reports in early March, the U.S. held top-level talks with the U.K. on how they can cooperate more closely to reduce the chances of war with China over Taiwan and to explore conflict contingency plans for the first time. The report said the U.S. was not engaging the U.K. because of an imminent threat. The Taiwan dialogue was intended to complement more advanced discussions. But it's the first time the U.S. sharing intelligence on Taiwan with the U.K., which was previously classified as Norforeign, a designation that bars information sharing with any foreign officials.
Media reports, in March, the White House Indo-Pacific Coordinator, Kurt Campbell, and the top National Security Council China official, Laura Rosenberger, held a 2-day meeting with the UK team on Indo-Pacific strategy. Media said that the U.S. Admiral John Aquilino, head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, last month told media that the Ukraine war underscored the risk that China poses to Taiwan. The U.S. has been meeting with Japan and Australia as Beijing has stepped up military activity around Taiwan.
China's central bank and finance ministry, as well as executives from dozens of local and international leaders such as HSBC, have held an emergency meeting on April 22nd to discuss how they could protect the country's overseas assets from U.S.-led sanctions, similar to those imposed on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. The officials and attendees did not mention specific scenarios, but one possible trigger for such sanctions is thought to be a communist China invasion of Taiwan.
Media reports senior regulator including Yi Huiman, president of the China Securities Regulator Commission, and Zhao Gang, who headed the CSRC from 2013 to 2016, asked bankers in attendance what could be done to protect the national's overseas assets, especially its $3.2 trillion in foreign reserves. Media reports, China's banking system isn't prepared for a freeze of its dollars assets or exclusions from the SWIFT messaging system. China holds more than $1 trillion U.S. Treasury bonds and office buildings in New York.
La, la.
Media reports that Putin and Zelensky will attend the G20 summit in November, as both leaders have been invited by the leader of host nation Indonesia on April 29th. The U.S. and some allies have been pressing Indonesia to extend an invitation to Ukraine, frustrated at Jakarta's refusal to exclude Putin. The host nation typically invites leaders from a handful of non-G20 states to attend as observers, although they don't sitting on formal meetings. Media reports that Russia is pressing for the summit in Bali.
Presiden Ukraina Volodymyr Zelensky,
Indonesian President Joko Widodo said the pandemic and the war in Ukraine has an impact on the recovery of the global economy, and it was under these circumstances that he invited Putin and Zelensky to the summit, calling them separately over the past week. He said, "I express my hope that the war can end soon and a peaceful resolution through talks can progress. We understand that G20 can be a catalyst for global economic recovery. So far, Putin has declined to meet with Zelensky, but the Ukrainian leader says it's the only way to end this war."
According to a U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis report released on April 28th, the U.S. economy unexpectedly shrank at a 1.4% annualized rate in the first 3 months of 2022, after more than a year of rapid growth. The new data is fueling concerns about a recession in the future amid steady inflationary pressures and uncertainty over the war in Ukraine. The slowdown is the first since the COVID-19 recession in April 2020. Last year, the U.S. economy grew by 5.7%, the fastest full-year clip since 1984.
It's not hard to see why. For this story, CBS 21 researched what...
According to the report, in the first quarter, a record wave of COVID-19 cases spurred by the Omicron variant resulted in continued restriction and business disruptions, while government assistance programs including forgivable loans to businesses and social benefits to households expired or tapered off, thus furthering preventing growth. The decrease reflected broad declines in exports, government spendings, and business inventories, along with increased imports.
Japanese TV Asahi News announcer Yumiko Matsuo broke down in a live program last week when reading the news of Putin bestowing honors on the brigade that committed atrocities in Bucha, Ukraine. In a viral clip posted on Reddit on April 27th, the Japanese news announcer had to stop her broadcast because she could not control her emotions as she gave the news. She apologized for the emotional reaction immediately, but it was met with applause from the audience.
Matsuo was reporting about the war crimes in Ukraine's Bucha region. She had just shown clips of children hiding in the bunker of the Mariupol steel mill.
VTR でもお伝えしました製鉄所に未だに市民の方が多く残っています。ごめんなさい。失礼しました。そんな中でごめんなさい、ちょっとさっきの重要のニュースがちょっと悔しい思いで読んでしまいました。すいません、冷静さを保ちます。
Hollywood actress Angelina Jolie visited the Ukrainian city of Lviv on April 30th as a special envoy for the United Nations Refugee Agency. The refugee agency said more than 12.7 million people have fled their homes in Ukraine in the past 2 months, which represents around 30% of Ukraine's pre-war population. Jolie went to stations to meet people displaced by the current war with Russia, but had to evacuate not before long, when the air raid siren sounded. Last month, in her role as a special envoy, Jolie visited Yemen, where millions of people have also been displaced by war.
Oh, no, it's great. It just means if we don't know from you...
During the visit to Lviv station, Jolie met volunteers working with the displaced, who told her that each of the psychiatrists on duty spoke to about 15 people a day. Many of those in the situation are children, aged from 2 to 10. At one point during her visit to the station, she tickled a small girl dressed in red, who laughed with delight. She also posed for photo with the volunteers and some of the children. Later on, air raid sirens started to sound, and Jolie, together with her aides, walked quickly out of the station.
Are you afraid? No, I'm okay.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. Let's make every day a fun day. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I will see you next time.